Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Aimee Schreiber.
And I'm Hillary Zwallen. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries. Hello, fellow Intentionists. Thanks for joining us today. We are talking with blogger Lettie Cooper of SimpleSouliving as she joins Aimee for a second time to discuss the topic of self-love. And before you add an eye roll or you go, okay, all I hear about is self-love. It's everywhere. This was, for me, a very profound episode because they really explore the differences between self-love and self-care and why we need both. But also she really dives into her personal self-love strategies of meditation, journaling, even mindful dishwashing and dog walking, and the line between using and abusing facilitators of self-love. So whether they come in the form of religious beliefs, friends, romantic partners, or even therapy. And they both, I thought Aimee and Lettie had some amazing insights on this stuff. And I walked away from listening to this interview just being like, wow, I needed to hear that today. So I hope you guys will find that to be the case for you as well. They dive into the illusions of control and comfort, and they talk fear, and they share their personal insights on impermanence, nonlinear time, and deconstructing old beliefs around eternity and self-love. Lettie shares her experience with depression, the trinity of mind, body, and spirit, and how she's learned to communicate with herself through it all. And they close out the discussion with insights on spiritual self-reliance, how relationships are a mirror of our own ability to love ourselves. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of this episode. We'd love to have discussions with you over on our Facebook page. I really think this is a topic that applies to virtually everybody. And especially if you're in a moment where you're feeling like you're at a loss, and you're feeling like you need a change, or you need a change in how you're approaching yourself and your attitude towards yourself. A little bit about Lettie. So she was born and raised in the middle of the tent revival religious era by a mother whose houses, jobs, and interests changed with the wind. So this has given her a wide range of curiosity that she's expanded on to seek out her own personal truths in areas that have come to define her. She's been diving deep into personal development and is impassioned to help others heal their souls and their bodies. She's recently been practicing with herbal remedies, natural treatments in an effort to live as clean as possible. Lettie currently lives in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and is an online blogger at simplesouliving.com. We also did an episode with Lettie about women's circles, which to me was one of the best that has been recorded so far. So take a listen. If you liked this episode, if you get through this one and you love it, go find the other episode that Lettie recorded with Aimee. And especially if you're really feeling the call for women gatherings and wanting to figure out how to facilitate that for your own community, or maybe you want to step up your own friend circles and add a level of deepness and meaning into how you're relating to your friends and the other women in your life. So without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Aimee and Lettie.
Lettie, thank you so much for talking with me today. Let's just dive right in. Let's talk self-love now. Ooh. You just wrote an amazing blog post about the difference between self-love and self-care, which I think people, me included, get confused about, like, oh, I got a massage, therefore I love myself. Mm-hmm. And you've really amazingly laid out the difference. So can you just talk to me about that?
Absolutely. I myself was highly confused at the difference, and running in all of these kind of self-awareness and personal improvement journeys. I hear self-love all the time. Self-love, self-love, self-love. And it really got me thinking, did that massage that I had yesterday really show me that I loved me? Did it change anything? Did it make a difference? And though maybe my left shoulder felt better, I didn't see that it was doing a lot for me within. And so it sent me down this road of really kind of determining the difference between self-love and all the acts that we are putting in that category, be it a massage, be it if a gentleman is giving himself a treat to front row tickets to a game. Sorry, sports analogies are about the only thing I relate to men. But whatever you guys do out there and categorize as self-love. But for women, the hot bubble bath or the massage or maybe even some bubbly or romantic movie. I started looking at these things and I'm like, can I really classify it as self-love? And that led me down a road of looking at what love is and how did I show love to others. And in my world, when I'm trying to show love to someone, I try to see where their pain point is. What can I help them with? How can I assist them? I am very much under the nurture category. And if I see something that's really bothering somebody, a close friend or a partner, then I want to try to help alleviate that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I kind of started looking at how others show love to me and how I feel loved. Sometimes we love someone and they don't realize it at all. So I really wanted to analyze how I felt love and what was working for me on the receiving end as well as the giving end. And when I started breaking this down, I realized that self-love needed to be this love. Self-love needed to be something that affected the inside more than the outside. So I started seeing the difference between these and I labeled one self-care, and that's where I would put the bubble bath. Oh, I've had a stressful day at work. I want to relax in a bubble bath. Or even if it's a medical thing, I have back spasms, so I give myself a massage once a week. These are elements of self-care, and these are things that help the physical body from breaking down, from wearing out. You can even take it on an internal spectrum as far as I use a hot cup of herbal tea as a de-stressor. This is still not self-love. This is self-care. It can be even from a medical perspective. I have allergies, so I take my allergy medicine. Still under self-care. Mm-hmm. These are all things that keep the physical body from breaking down. Self-love is what keeps your emotional state from breaking down. And self-love is what we are lacking, in my opinion, as a society, because we are so accustomed to giving love. We are shown that through family. We are shown that through friends. We're shown that from childhood, how to love others, how to interact with others. But very rarely are we shown how to love ourselves and interact with ourselves. Mm-hmm. I make a comment talking about being vulnerable on your blog and wondering how many people are laughing at you. I make a comment that I talk to myself. I do.
I actually liked that.
I live alone and I work online, so I don't even have that office space interaction. And when it comes down to doing something that I'm proud of, there is not someone there to say that. Mm-hmm. Like my mother, when I was a child, I'm so proud of you. And that fulfills that kind of inner self-love. It gives you that boost of confidence, of self-esteem, of self-respect. But when you need to build those on your own, those come from self-love. And I am in a habit, and I laugh at myself every time it happens. When something goes well or I do something, I'm like, oh, I just love you. And I say that out loud.
That's amazing. No, that is so necessary. If everyone walked around doing that, I think the world would be a very different place. That's important stuff. If you cannot congratulate yourself, it doesn't have to be out loud, it's more fun that way. Then you have to be the one to take care of that part of you. I think so often we put that on someone else, our partner or our parent or our friend, seeking that validation from external sources when it seems like you've done a lot of work in discovering that's only you can do that part. To say this physical statement of congratulations to yourself and I love you to yourself, that seems like a really great strategy, because it is the power of just speaking in general is very...
Words definitely hold power. They have a force.
They do. So is there anything else that you do, like an actual out loud thing, or maybe just inner practice that has helped with this?
Absolutely. Self-love is personal. It's however you want to experience. I do make reference that there are many forms of self-love that have been taught through thousands and thousands of years of practice, mainly in the Eastern cultures. I think they have more reverence for the inner self and for the spirituality that is needed in life. I struggle with that word because I don't want people to think that I'm saying they need to go to church. I am not applying spirituality to religion, so I want to make that clear. That being said, you get into Buddhism, Taoism, a lot of the Eastern religions, and you look at how they use yoga, and you look at not as an exercise. Caveat there. You look at how they use yoga to connect to self, and you look at how they use meditation to connect to self. They are very focused on connecting to self. And when you allow you to connect with you and make that a very personal interaction, then you are giving yourself that love you need because you can see where it's missing. So in my world, what has worked for me, yoga does not work for me, by the way. I love yoga. It is not part of my self-love spiritual journey. It is definitely part of my exercise practice. So I will say that out loud. But in my world, meditation has worked wonders, and it is not long. I am not one that is out there going, oh, I meditate an hour a day. I shoot for 5 minutes. If I have more time, awesome. But those 5 minutes can make all the difference in my day because it is something I gave me. I'm not giving myself money. I'm not giving myself food. I'm not giving myself something tangible. I am giving myself space. Just as we spoke before about circles holding space, you really need to hold your own space. You are not always going to have a friend or a group to give you that space. So when you are giving yourself self-love, it is about creating space to be comfortable, space to be heard by yourself. We do not listen to ourselves. That sounds crazy, but we do not. We blast through life. We ignore those inner gut feelings until we have that moment. And I think that is a backwards concept to living. We need to have that moment all the time because when you are in full communication with yourself every day, then you will find everything goes so much smoother and you are in tune with what you need, even in a physical way. By giving yourself that space and that self-love, you can realize before you are super stressed and you need that bubble bath, you already know it's coming because you're in tune with that kind of inner voice, that shift in, it's hard to explain. It's really hard to put that in words. But there is a shift. You can feel it inside and you're like, whether you can anticipate it, some would say there's intuition involved, or whether you just have a deeper awareness of what you feel when you're comfortable and full of self-love versus how you feel when you're empty from self-love. And we don't always identify that. We don't always identify that that is what we're needing. And we can even go to doctors, like medical doctors, in search of the answer to these problems and not realize that what we need is either socialization or we need less socialization. In my world, it's been journaling. Journaling is my key form. Journaling and meditation, these two are my, I don't want to say outlets, as it's more of an inlet to let in the love. But I know if I've opened up my journal and there are 3 or 4 spaces where days should be, I haven't been giving myself that time. And if I meditate and I can't quiet my mind, I know I haven't been giving myself that time. So something is out of balance. And you do not have to meditate. You do not have to journal. Someone said, I wish I could remember. Someone had said that the best way to connect with yourself is in the mundane things. And I wish I could give them credit because it's when I started realizing that one of my favorite times to meditate is when I'm doing dishes.
That's a good one.
Dishes don't require any thought, but it is this kind of captive audience of yourself, right? Because you're, and I do believe there's a connection to the water. There's my kind of woo-woo side to it. I enjoy the water on my hands. I enjoy the feeling of it. I'm one of those strange people who actually enjoy doing dishes, but it does give me this concentrated time to just reflect. And because it is this mundane action, my mind can slip into a meditative state before I've even realized it. Because if I'm not focused on a particular thought on my to-do list or blah, 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 it gives this emptiness, this natural emptiness. Another big one is my dog walks, especially if I put in headphones to some sort of soft music. No, not if I'm blasting Lady Gaga down the street, but if I've chosen something soft to just kind of block out street noise, my brain can enter that meditative state. And it's so much fun when it does it and you don't realize it until you realize it. And then you're like, oh, wow. And they're like, what have I been thinking about for the last 20 minutes? And then you realize you haven't been thinking, but you have been processing. When your brain can shut off, you can begin processing. And that is a big one that people struggle with, is that your mind is not you.
That's huge.
I love that Jim Carrey's jumping out and saying that, and people are like, you're crazy. But it's so true. Your mind is this separate thing that is part of your physical makeup, but it is not who you are. If our thoughts actually defined who we were, horrifying, absolutely horrifying. The things that can go through my mind, and I'm like, oh, where did that come from?
Right. Well, and it's like you said, though, it's giving yourself the space to actually see that. Like, you will never know that until you actually stop and look into your mind, give yourself the space to be with yourself. And then you see that and you're like, oh, what a major relief. I am not my thoughts. I'm not my feelings. There are these things that march through and then are gone. Like, it's interesting that you brought up the difference between the Eastern and Western thought, and how the Eastern systems are so good at giving space and time for this, because it's usually a lot more like collectivist societies that these philosophies come from. And with our Western, very individualistic society, you would think that somewhere some sort of strategy and spot would have developed for this, but it really hasn't. And that's why so many of us are getting it from yoga, from meditation, from these other systems. But yeah, I love everything you just said about that. Everything you said was spot on. Really good way to think about it, as just this quality time that you give to yourself, in the same way that you would try to give quality time and nurturing to someone else that you're trying to show love to. You can't love someone without giving them of your time and presence.
Right. Absolutely. And in the world that we live in right now, where everything's so fast-paced and go, and we barely have time to squeeze in 6 hours of sleep.
Right. That's the thing, is the distraction, right?
Absolutely. And I think the distraction is almost intentional so that you don't have to do this. Because when you learn to love yourself, you also have to learn to love your flaws, which means you have to see them.
Right.
And we can fight against that. I don't want to acknowledge this inside of myself. But the funny thing is, the moment you acknowledge it is the moment you can begin correcting it.
Right.
And sometimes the correction is the acceptance of it. And that has been huge for me. And when learning to love myself and show myself that self-love, I learned to accept it. I mean, it's parents. I always love looking at it as parents. You need to be your own parent, because okay, let me set that aside. Good parents. Good parents, yes. They have an unconditional love for their children. My sister is the most amazing mother, and she has a child that just screams all the time. And he's old enough that he should be using some words, and he's getting there now. But she spoke to someone who said it is his only form of communication because he so desperately wants to speak. But he can't. He's just a little delayed in that. He's working on it. It's coming. But she had to learn to communicate with the screams. So instead of getting exasperated, she stopped. She'd let him scream for a second, and then she'd be like, what do you want? And she'd hold up things until he could point and say that that's what he wanted. So she learned to communicate with these things. This is the level of patience and understanding we need to give ourselves, because sometimes we are screaming inside and we don't know why. Why am I depressed? Why am I angry? Why am I upset? And then what do? We go to our doctor and we get a Valium or we get a Xanax, and that is not understanding ourselves. That is just quieting that voice.
Right.
Putting a cap on it. So if you can learn to give yourself the same love that a parent gives to their child, that unconditional, fully accepting, this may be my flaw, but I am going to work with it, around it, or overcome it. That is huge.
Yeah, well, and in the million ways that our bodies and emotions try to communicate with us, these are all cries for help. They're ways of us screaming at ourselves to, you know, make a change. And I think that's also part of like the fear and resistance to looking inward is we become very comfortable in our with our flaws.
The comfort zone.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we know it's wrong. We know there's something like not ideal about it, but still it's what we're comfortable with. And if we stop to look inward, we realize somewhere that, oh, I'm going to have to make a change about this, and change is scary because I don't know what to expect.
Absolutely.
So becoming comfortable with uncertainty, I think, also becomes huge in one's delving inward to love yourself. Because when you do love yourself, you are going to do positive, amazing things for yourself.
Absolutely.
But it's not going to be like, I mean, we talked a little before about like releasing our control over the situation. Like, we're not going to have it tight under wraps to where we know what the next thing is going to be.
But I don't think we realize that when we try to maintain that control, how much stress that builds. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much you think you're in control, something will remind you you're not. Absolutely. Like, you can have everything planned down to the minute, and something unexpected will happen. And there is so much beauty behind that if you stop fighting it. Right. We would release a lot of stress if we would release control and just let things be.
Yeah, it is the grand illusion that causes so many...
Control is an illusion.
So many negative, unnecessary suffering really is what it does.
I'd also like to bounce on that comfort zone thought. I think when we look at things and we're like, scared, I don't want to do that, I don't know what that's going to create, I'll lose my comfort. Comfort is also an illusion. Comfort, you can never lose comfort. Comfort is something you build. It's like anything in life, whether it's exercise and your muscles are uncomfortable, and then what happens when you keep doing that exercise? They become comfortable. It can be physical, your body adapts, your mind adapts, your emotions adapt. So you really need to stop seeing comfort as a boundary. We, myself, need to stop seeing comfort as a boundary line. There is no boundary line on comfort. Comfort is exactly where you want it to be. So if you're going to leave this comfort zone, whatever this may be, it is important to know that that comfort is on the other side too. It will look different. But people that are imprisoned their entire lives come to a comfort zone. People that are in poverty their entire lives come to a comfort zone. And I think the people that show it to us the best are children. Children can be happy in any situation, and their comfort is developed through an understanding that it's held within. And I think that's something we need to recognize it when that fear props up and that unknown creeps in. It's okay. And most of the time, not always, but most of the time, we can actually return. If something doesn't work out, nothing in life is permanent. Nothing lasts forever. So even if we put ourselves out there and it winds up really being the wrong space for us, go forward or go backwards. You don't have to stay. So most of our fears are really irrational. They're just fear. And fear, I guess, if we want to talk about illusions, that's the ultimate illusion.
Well, it's because it's based upon nothing. Like it is truly baseless when you really stop to examine it. That's a really amazing point about comfort, that I think you're right, that most people view it as something that happens to you, as instead of something that you create based on the fact that you're a human, and that's what humans do for themselves. So
we decide what we want and what we like, and that becomes our comfort zone.
Right, and that's gonna happen, and that's not something that anyone has to be worried won't be there. You know, I think the initial discomfort that happens when you change is off-putting, again, like you just said, because we think it's gonna be forever.
that adaptation period.
Right. The whole permanence concept was something that was so incredibly revolutionary for me, coming from very religious background of this thought of eternity was always going on. So it's like
terrifying.
Yeah. So I mean, like, okay, you can have eternal happiness with your family forever, and it's a thing, or you can have eternal sadness. And so everything's eternal. And so the idea that, like, wait, nothing lasts forever. Feelings don't last forever. You have a child and he's 1 year old for 1 year. Mm-hmm. You don't have that child anymore. You have a teenager suddenly. You know, it's like everything changes, and it just takes 2 minutes, maybe 5, to look around and see, wait a minute. Everything that I feel internally about permanence is false, clearly, because I see that everything is shifting. And that was something that gave me this just huge relief when I come up against things that are uncomfortable, an uncomfortable feeling of anxiety. Like, I immediately tell myself, like, oh, this is going to pass. This isn't going to last. And that's something that, like, I just... when I realized that, I was like, why did no one tell me this before? Like, this would have been so helpful in life. Have you had that experience with, I know that you grew up in very religious.
Highly religious.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think the big one for me was the eternity afterwards. I was so afraid in every step I took, knowing that this little finite amount of time was going to determine eternity. That is terrifying, especially as a child, because I feel like we grasp that in a more literal way as children. So when I am being told I'm going to have shiny or fiery, and those are my only 2 options, and it's all going to depend on what I do here and now, that was a terrifying concept. And I definitely, coming out of that, had to reevaluate how I saw time. Mm-hmm. I fully deconstructed my religious and spiritual beliefs to find out which ones I believed because I truly believed them and which ones I believed because I was told to believe them, and came to this idea that I no longer believe time is linear. I fully believe time works in spirals and fractals and infinite patterns. And I don't believe that when we end here, we maintain this single soul that goes on to another place. I'm much more in the belief of a reincarnation type idea, more of a scientific approach of energy being neither created nor destroyed, so it has to convert into other energy. So these things definitely changed from the religious background to what I am now sitting in, and it further, I guess, supports my idea of the need for self-love in the moment. I think that is missing when you're looking at any sort of religious, in my experience. Religion is about giving. And that's a beautiful thing. I love that. It's definitely part of religion that I kept, but it doesn't often cover giving to yourself. Mm-hmm. It doesn't often cover the importance of filling yourself up with self-love. That can actually be considered selfish instead. And that's a terrible line that needs to be more fully developed. Self-love is not selfish. Self-love is self-preservation. And we're not going to get all the love we need from God. Whether you believe in him or not, whether you believe in the goddess, whether you believe in other entities. And this is going to bring us full circle when you said in relationships, we look for it from our partners. No one, whether it's God, whether it's church, whether it's religion, whether it's your husband, whether it's your mother, no one will ever give you the amount of self-love you need in any sort of regular form, whether regular basis. It's never going to be enough. And I unfortunately feel that because we have not been taught to self-love, this is what is creating the strains in our relationships, in our marriages, and even, if you want to take it to the religious side, in our churches, even in our circles. Yeah. I would never want any woman to come into a gathering that I'm holding with the expectation that she will be filled up from others.
Right.
The whole idea of holding space is allowing the person to fill up themselves. And when you learn to fill yourself up, when you learn to love yourself, then you no longer have to rely on these external sources, and you become a thriving individual all on your own. Mm-hmm. And that is key. And it actually goes back to our little discussion on control. That is the control you have. You cannot control whether someone's going to love you. You cannot control whether your spouse gives you what you need, in air quotes there. You can't control anything outside of your inner emotions. You can't even control your body. You can't control cancer cells. You can't control that cold that came on. The only thing you can control are your own reactions and what you give yourself. Do you give yourself that love? Do you give yourself that acceptance? Do you give yourself that space? Do you give yourself that time, that quality time within? This is what you can control. And when you have that in check, when you have that in balance, that's when you can come across those emotions you were talking about, that anxiety. And you say, you can stop yourself and say, this will pass. And that's because you've given yourself that inner knowing. You know yourself. And that came from self-love and self-exploration. For me, I love the fact my nemesis is depression. And it used to be awful when I was a child, teenager, and in my early 20s. And I was on the medical train for that, and deep darkness, sitting alone. And it really consumed me. It fully consumed me until I got on this train of self-preservation, self-love. And now if I feel that creeping in, I know to stop. Nope. This is not me. This is not what's inside. This is an emotion coming on. And I also know to look at why. Quite often, it's lack of sleep. I've pinpointed my depression sneaks in when I'm tired. And then I'm like, I'm whining and it's not enough and I need more. And then I'm like, oh wait, I can give myself that more. I can stop. I can go, I am exhausted. I'm going to do a 10-minute meditation and I'm going to go to bed early. Kicks it. And that's when I believe you said it earlier, that our body talks to us, our emotions, our mind, our body, this whole idea of trinity. I love that the trinity permeates everything from ancient religions to ancient symbols drawn on walls. That's a whole nother conversation, but we can definitely just look at the trinity right now in ourselves. We have our mind, which is its own thing. We have our emotions, which is its own thing. And then we have our essence, our soul, our spirit, whatever this is that we're diving inside, our true selves. And these are three separate yet fully interconnected pieces to who we are. But when we learn to love ourselves and give ourselves that quality time, we can listen to what these emotions are telling us. We can listen to what our mind is telling us and put this. And I would actually like to say that mind and body are kind of one thing. They're those tangible parts of ourselves. There are thoughts, which are actually an energetic, tangible thing. And then there are pains, which are an actual energetic, tangible thing. And we need to learn to listen to these. That inner self, that part of self-love is listening. When you show someone love, you listen to them. And that is something we must do to our own emotions and our minds and our thoughts and our bodies. What is it saying? And then if you can learn to listen to it and hear it, then you can ask it, where is this coming from? And you are not crazy. You are not talking to yourself. No, you are absolutely talking to yourself. You are talking to yourself, but you're not crazy for doing it, because you will truly receive an answer. Now, if you hear an audible voice from the other room telling you something, maybe you want to seek some extra therapy. But if something within just says, I hate my job, I need to quit. And then you're in that comfort zone going, I can't quit. I got these bills to pay. And da, 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 da. Stop, breathe, and look at the pros and cons of that. Okay, so you're paying your bills. You have the nice house. You have the exterior package. But what are you paying for within? Are you miserable? Do you hate your life? Do you hate your schedule? Do you hate your job, your work, what you're dedicating yourself to? We are here, back to time, for a finite space. And when you learn to love yourself, you learn to give yourself what you need in that finite space to be happy, to be whole, to not be angry, to not be stressed, to not have that anxiety, to not be depressed. You can give yourself whatever it is you need. Maybe you do need to be a lawyer. Maybe that is what drives you, that you are happy, and that would stress me out. But some people, that is exactly what you need. We are each one fully individual.
Right, it looks different for every person.
Mm-hmm. But learning to give yourself that is self-healing. That is self-truth. That is self-love. And that comes through space and quiet and time, giving yourself.
Yeah, I love what you said about going directly to yourself to ask these questions. Like, what do you need? What do I need? Like, and learning how to listen to your body. Because I think so often we think we need a go-between person. And I've thought a lot about this in the context of Christianity, because I've thought a lot about the concept of Jesus and him as a healer and a forgiver of sins, and the entire archetype that surrounds the idea of this savior. And I think that one of the most powerful things about that concept for people's lives, because people do have real experiences where they were involved with something, they feel sorry about it, and what is it that happens when they feel that Jesus has forgiven them? And I think it's that they feel they finally give themselves permission to love themselves.
They've been forgiven. Because
they think, well, if Jesus can love me, if God can love me, if whatever it is can love me and forgive me despite my flaws, now I can forgive myself. Now I can love myself. And I'm not knocking those types of systems and people who want to approach it from that angle.
Absolutely.
But the idea that, like, you can just love yourself. Like, you don't need permission. You don't need a God to tell you that you're lovable. You don't need anything but just to make that choice, to say that, to live that for yourself. And I think, yeah, it's a powerful and necessary practice, this self-love. It's a big one. It's a rabbit hole that just keeps going and going. But once you've developed these habits, like you said, you tell yourself that you love yourself now, like audibly, like these little things that seem by themselves like they wouldn't make maybe that much of a difference, but altogether it reflects an inner attitude that you have created and cultivated a new comfort zone, like we were talking about, of you can develop comfort in loving yourself. Like it will become a habit if you work on it.
I think there are many tools to get us to a point of loving ourselves. Mm-hmm. Religion is a great one. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that's all there is to religion. I just want to point out that if you follow a religious path and you can find the redemption, the forgiveness, and the self-love through a God giving that to you, awesome. Use the tool that you've been given. I use women's gatherings. I definitely have my tools to use because self-love is not always easy.
No.
It's not always apparent that we need it. And we don't always know how to give it to ourselves. We can definitely come across things in life and you're like, I don't know how to get past this. I don't know how to stop hating myself for whatever it is, or I don't know how to forgive myself, or I don't know how to build that confidence back up, or whatever you're going through. Self-love may be a personal journey, but sometimes we do need a facilitator.
Right.
And religion is a great facilitator because you don't have to share it audibly. Like, I guess unless you're in the Catholic religion, but then there are obviously rules between you and your priest, and that doesn't go anywhere. It's the sanctity of the box. Mm-hmm. But religion in general allows you to talk to yourself, but God is listening. And it gives you, it's the same process, but without having to go to somebody when you're unable to share whatever that darkness is that you're trying to get rid of. For me, like I said, I use the gatherings absolutely as a tool to investigate where I'm not giving myself enough love, what areas I need to work on. Perhaps it's areas that I bumped into that, okay, I can love that part of myself, but I also want to improve that part of myself. And that journey of improving or healing, that is self-love right there. So by going down this journey, you are kind of forced into self-love if you choose to correct or move around or go above. I also use friends, one-on-one phone calls. I can't tell you how many times I've called my sister when I'm working through something. She's one of my go-tos, and just used her as the facilitator for my own self-love. I'm not looking for her forgiveness. I'm not looking for her answers to whatever problem I have, but I know that she's going to listen to me, and I know that she is going to love me afterwards anyway. So I do have that kind of unconditional love set up through my sister. Some of us use therapists. Yeah, therapy is a great facilitator for self-love. We just need someone to listen to us. So I'm very grateful to religion for that. What I want to say about these things, as much as I love facilitators and I use them myself, be aware that a facilitator allows for... A facilitator can break down. I guess that's the best way to put it. My sister may not be available. She may be too stressed to deal with my issues. She may snap at me. Maybe something I do say angers her. Same thing with a friend. Women's groups may not be available. You may not feel heard. They are typically arranged around a particular topic, and that may not be where you need self-love at the moment. And religion, coming from a religious background myself, I got to a point where God's love was no longer enough for me. And I became angry at God. And I remember yelling at him, standing on the beach and screaming out at the ocean, "Why have you left me? Why did you do this to me? Why did you put me in this situation?" So when you rely on external sources to fulfill that love, they can break down. They can fail you because you are putting something on them that is not theirs to bear. So my breakdown with God is what forced me to look at how to self-correct, self-love, and how to go inside and figure out, okay, if God can't fix this, and my women's groups can't fix this, and my faith can't fix this, then the only thing that's left is for me to fix it or for me to accept it. I'm really big on the acceptance because I've learned that there is no such thing as perfection, and thank God it doesn't exist. Can you imagine if we all had to live up to it?
Right. Well, we talked about that before. That's what so many of us felt like, the pressure of, okay, if I make one little mistake, then that's going to be bad damnation news forever. So yeah, certainly that's a really important point you brought up about not overly relying on these facilitators, because yes, they can be helpful and necessary at certain points. But if you don't ever learn how to take what you learn there and really apply it for yourself, toward yourself, then it's not going, in the end, it falls apart. It's not going to.
Because you're still needing something else or someone else to love you. You're needing that validation. And at the end of the day, we are all here alone. And that is not meant to be a sad thought.
No, it's true, though.
It's part of your responsibility as being a human, as living on this planet. You eventually have to stop blaming everybody, stop relying on everybody. Not to say that you can't. I definitely rely on those when I need it. There are times you need to be held up, but you need to know that you can also do it on your own.
Right.
And that is very important. And it is also, unfortunately, what sabotages human connections is that reliance on somebody else to either be the reason for your faults or to fix your faults. And I can't tell you how many relationships I have destroyed in the past because I wanted them to complete me. That's not how it works. Sorry, Tom Cruise. It just doesn't work that way. You do not complete me, but I complete me. And when two people can come together, both in their complete selves and not need the other one, but still be there to support them when they do need balance or structure or just that space once more to be heard and to be seen, that that's that epic love story. That's that saga we all look for, where we can both be our individual selves and we don't need our partners to accept every single detail about us, because we accept it. And they accept our love of ourselves.
Right.
And in the end, that is what they're accepting. I also want to say really quickly, that's a big part of the self-love. If you want to go back to that mirror idea in life, we are often given the love we give ourselves. It is not because, I had to work through this one for a long time, it is not because the other person is incapable of giving you more. It's because you're incapable of accepting more than you give yourself, because you've decided that is the love that you're worth. Whatever love you give yourself is now the limitation that you have imposed of your own worthiness for love. So the more love you give yourself, the more you're going to actually find you are loved from others. And that is an amazing reflection to have come back at you. And it is also one that I had to experience the hard way through relationships, going, why are you doing this to me? And then go, oh, this is what I do to myself. This is how I treat me. This is my own acceptance. So if you find that you are overly critical of yourself, you are most likely going to attract other critical people. And it's because that is the love that A, is in your comfort zone,
Right.
and B, that you're allowing yourself to receive. And you cannot allow yourself to receive greater love from others without first giving it to yourself, because you have to know what it feels like. You have to know what it looks like. You have to know how it tastes and smells. And by doing that for yourself, you can set these new definitions on what love is and how big it can be and how all-encompassing and accepting it can be. And then you can allow that love to come in from others. And you can also recognize when others are incapable of giving that to you. And that is the person that is not going to be the ideal partner, because they're not going to be able to love themselves nor accept the love that you're able to give. And that is going to cause this kind of division between you. It's not that you can't love them more. They're not going to allow you to love them more. And that will cause problems. And it causes problems in friendships as well as relationships. It causes problems in families. When I have a family member who I love deeply and can still not connect with after an entire lifetime. This person has known me since infancy. And I so desperately want a deep connection. And I always blamed me. Why? What am I doing wrong? And then I realized he can only accept the love from me that he gives to himself. So I had to finally backtrack and go, this is not me. This is not my inadequacy or my inability. It's something that he has a line at, and this is all I can give him. And that's enough for him. He's not asking more from me. I'm wanting to give more and upset that it's not being received.
Right. You have a different vision of what could be. And
Absolutely. And that's a huge one, to recognize the mirror in others and in yourself.
That's huge. Yeah, that's super important. You really described that well. That was amazing information. Do you have any other nuggets of wisdom about self-love that you could say?
No, the only thing I could possibly think of is that self-care should not be set aside either. I know we've pushed really deep into self-love and separating it from self-care, but neither one is more relevant than the other. They're deeply connected. So you cannot give yourself all of this inner work and this self-love and this self-care and then realize you were doing so much journaling or meditation or yoga that you also forgot that you needed to eat or go for your annual checkup. They really do have to be balanced because self-care is still self-love. It's just very superficial. It is the basic things we would do. If I meet a stranger, I am still going to help them if they are cold or if they are hungry. There was a homeless person sleeping outside of my house last season, and it was one of those really cold, wet, nasty days. And he was just shivering under these bags. And I brought him this huge cup of coffee, and I had some extra creamers and sugars. And he was so grateful. This is a little tiny act of self-care. Now, he could definitely read it as a love between humanity, as that connection that you care enough. But all I wanted to really drive home here is that we have to do both. Just as we would care for others, we have to care for ourselves in these very base, practical ways. We need a roof over our heads. We need something to eat. Ideally, most of us need at least one friend. We're not all social people, but most of us need one point of connection. And we do need to bathe ourselves, and we need to brush our hair, and we need to clean our clothes, and we need to take care of medical conditions. So I don't want anyone to come away from this and think that self-love is more crucial than self-care or more vital in life. They are definitely on par. I just don't need to talk about self-care because society has done that enough for us already. Right. And in fact, there's a whole nother topic between separating materialism from self-care. That's a huge caveat into society. But going outside of that, just know that don't ever forfeit self-love for self-care or self-care for self-love. I just choose to talk about self-love more because it is something that is missing, where most of us know we need to take care of our physical selves.
Yeah, your body is your vessel. You know, it really does make an impact on the deep inner work that you're able to do if your body is healthy and you've done what you need to do to make yourself feel good in that way, which is one of the things that I found really fascinating when I started getting into yoga, is that they do so many weird physical, I don't want to call it weird, it's just like different things, like as far as like the physical cleaning processes, the tongue scraping, all the Ayurvedic things, which are amazing, and some more attractive to me than others.
I tried the tongue scraping. That wasn't super attractive to me.
No, I do scrape my tongue, but I have never like eaten the cloth to clean out my esophagus. I've not tried that one. That is a thing.
Wow, I was unaware of that one.
Oh, there's some intense cleansing techniques, and it's all based around the physical body. And it's like, well, why all this focus on that when it's really ultimately about like the inner work is what they say is the point of yoga, and that's the reason. Well, you have to take care of the entire being in order to get
even
where you want to go.
Even if it's separate forms, it's all in the same package. Absolutely. There are a ton of spiritual practices that are equally intertwined with the physical. Certain shamanic practices that can't be done unless you have abstained from certain foods or from certain physical pleasures, and even certain ones that you need to abstain from certain levels of exertion. And I've read up on several things. Ayahuasca is one that's very interesting to me, and it is something that requires, I believe, 3 weeks is preferable, but I think most people stick with around a week of extreme clean living. Oh. But to the extreme of, I will have all raw fruits and vegetables and limited sugars and only drink water, and you have no alcohol and you have no sex and you have no artificial products or artificial sweeteners. And this, according to the shaman, is imperative to the spiritual experience. And once more, you get into that kind of reflection and that mirror look at things. If you can give yourself self-care and take care of your body, then you are probably more apt to give yourself self-love. But if you're someone who has a hard time even taking care of your physical self, you may find that giving yourself self-love is more of a challenge. So they're definitely intertwined and kind of reflective.
Well, thanks so much for sharing all your wisdom about that. I feel like we could talk for days about this.
We could, for sure. I could talk for days.
I could listen for days.
Oh, well, thank you for being an amazing listener.
No, it was seriously amazing stuff. Thank you so much for talking with me. It was really, really, I think a lot of people are going to find that really helpful.
Oh, I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Why don't you tell listeners how they can reach you, what your blog website is, if you have social media accounts that you want people reaching out through. So how can we find you?
If you want to dive into more self-exploration, I put it out there on my website, SimpleSouliving, and that is with one L between soul and living. And any of my social accounts are connected to that. I am not highly active on my social accounts outside of tying in my articles. My work is definitely put into the articles themselves. but please shoot me an email or comment below the articles, even on my Facebook page. I love the interaction with people once they read something, and I am willing to go into it deeper with you, answer questions, or just hear if it helped you in any way. And I also enjoy a challenge if you want to confront the ideas. I do enjoy that because it allows me the time and space to look through them and see if there's something that I missed within myself or if I'm still standing in my own truth.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lettie. I would definitely recommend everyone go read through those articles. They are amazing and beautifully written, and I really enjoy them every time I read. Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.